Wichita Liberty TV, featuring host Bob Weeks. Local politics without the spin. Interviews with nationally respected economists. Hear directly from Kansas conservatives about what matters to you. It's individual liberty, limited government, and free markets. Wichita Liberty TV.
Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Kansas and Wichita government affairs and politics. We're broadcast on Great Plains Television. That's channel 26.1, Sunday morning at 8:30, repeated again at 4:30. Also at my site, The Voice for Liberty, that's on the internet at wichitaliberty.org. There you'll find all the old episodes of Wichita Liberty TV, show notes about today's episode, and all the other material that I and others produce almost every day there at The Voice for Liberty, wichitaliberty.org. So last week we had as our guest Kansas Representative Leo Delperding there, a first-term representative who represents far west Wichita. Today we flipped the map a little bit. We have as our guest Susan Humphries, again another first-term representative who represents far east Wichita plus Andover and kind of the surrounding area. And of course Karl Peterjohn, our co-host here. So Susan, welcome to Wichita Liberty
Thank you.
TV.
It's great to be here.
And so it's your first session of the legislature. Why did you get interested in doing this in the beginning?
We've always been interested in politics, but more from the just support other people side. And as you know, I got my law degree a little bit late in life and have been doing mostly adoption law. And I just felt like there's something more, wasn't sure what that was. And had several people approach me and say, you need to think about running for something. And then specifically our House district, because Dennis Hedke, the previous representative, was not going to run again, and we lived there, and it all just really fell into place. So it was nothing that's been on my bucket list for a long time. But I have a great interest and just feel so honored to have that opportunity.
So you mentioned that you are an attorney. Does that have any advantage to being in the legislature? I do notice that there was a lot of concern at the beginning of this year that there were no attorneys in the Kansas Senate except for one who had let his license lapse. But is being an attorney an advantage?
You know, I really think it is, because we have been trained to believe that words matter, particular words matter, how things go together. I mean, in law school, it's just you think a different way. And I'm not a great experienced attorney. I'm still rather new, but I do think it was a big advantage. And I think, for instance, I'm on the Judiciary Committee, which it's a lot about tweaking different statutes and things. The Senate didn't have any attorneys on the Judiciary Committee. So when it came time for the conference committee reports, the House had a great advantage, and that our chairman and vice chairman and minority were all attorneys. They could speak that language. They knew. I think that we had a great advantage in that case. And just being an attorney and sitting on the Judiciary Committee, following and tracking how statutes are written and what it means and how a judge might interpret something, or so I do think it was helpful.
We call that the sausage making, I think, part of legislating there. But you know, it is difficult. I pulled out something from a debate. Now, this was in the Senate, but it happens in the House too. If someone arose and said, and this is in writing too, but I move to amend Senate substitute for HB 2002 on page 15 by striking all in lines 13 through 29, following line 29 by inserting section 46 on the effective date of this act. The provisions of section 163 and 164 of 2017 substitute for Senate Bill number 189 are hereby declared to be null and void and shall have no force and effect. Now, how are you supposed to know what that means?
You know, we really don't. Even attorneys, we don't. If we don't have the bill sitting right in front of us, we don't know what that means. And so I think when amendments are made, it's very important that we get copies of the amendments. And they don't pass those out just automatically. You have to go ask for that.
Oh, really?
And I think that's something that really we could tweak a little bit that could be helpful. So yeah, there's verbiage like that, but nobody knows exactly what that means until they explain what it means from the well.
Yeah, and someone goes up there and explains what the amendment means. But Karl, haven't there been allegations in the past that some representatives have been misleading or even outright deceptive in explaining the meaning of an amendment.
In fact, there was quite a controversy a couple of years ago with the House Minority Leader in that very case.
Jim Ward.
And there were a lot of unhappy folks because of that. But having online resources, is that something that is helpful for you in terms of getting information? Because it's a tool the public can increasingly access information they couldn't get otherwise.
Yeah, so I'm going to be super honest here. This year I said I can learn so much. And then next year, my goal is to have my computer up every time, be able to see every amendment. But I just did not learn to navigate CanFocus yet, which is where all of that is. So that's my goal for next year.
Well, let me ask you a question from the 20th century. And,
yes.
and I was up there in the 1990s. Do they still give you all a set of the statute books in a printed copy for your office?
No, they're not printed anywhere, I don't think, are
we
they?
can't. Yes, we can get a set of the statute. We can.
You can, I mean, it used to be automatic.
I'm trying to think. I think I paid for them, but maybe I think we do get a set. But what I paid for was having my name stamped on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I think it was important to have. We need to have those in writing, and I have pulled them out occasionally.
Do they still produce the budgets in a printed form, or
Yes.
is it all online?
No, it's in a printed form.
It's
also.
in a printed form too.
We had a book.
And
that
you
was
also
on our
give you a
desk.
CD?
No.
For the dinosaurs. CD, Karl, no one, it's all online streaming. Netflix.
Wow.
I know, I got no
There's
CDs.
no Blockbuster video anymore.
I'm just
Karl.
trying to understand how it may have changed, and for the people out there who are chronologically gifted, at least I didn't mention cassette tapes.
Oh, I
Bob.
like that.
that's right.
Chronologically gifted. Me
Okay.
too.
Well, guys, we're going to have to take a moment off for a commercial break. So, Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks with co-host Karl Peterjohn, Kansas Representative Susan Humphries from East Wichita and Andover. So, even if you got the text of that amendment on your computer or printed paper, whatever it is, how do you know what that really means? Because you have to think, okay, if we delete this section of that, and I mean, it's a lot of moving pieces there to think about all together at the same time.
It is. I would say mostly the revisers help us understand things. So the revisers are a group of attorneys that work for the legislature.
Yeah.
There's also a group of researchers. And as a new legislator, I would say the revisers and the researchers are wonderful. They will answer any questions. They'll go to any link to help you understand. So I feel like it's on each representative to, if they don't understand it, you ask questions until you understand what's going on, what this means. And there are resources so that you can.
And is it possible to do all that in the time frame of debate on the floor?
No, there's just no way. That's why I think we should all get printed copies of the amendments and the balloons. I mean, when you're looking at it, then you can understand what's struck and what's new.
Susan, you're going to have to, for TV purposes, when you say balloons, this is sort of like road vacations at the county commission. It's misleading, so when you say balloons, you might want to clarify just a little bit.
So if we're looking at a statute and some language is added, it's just added in a balloon, like when you see a cartoon with what someone's thinking, it looks like that, and it's added in, or it's struck out. So,
and it's so, in legislation, it's so easy to change it, because you say you can have a statute that says, this statute will require that, and it could be saying this statute will provide that they may, or they may not.
Yes, or
Or
shall.
shall not, shall or shall not.
May or shall. I mean, those are big words, yes.
And so it entirely, just one or two words can completely turn the
Absolutely.
statute on its head.
Absolutely, yeah. It's important to.
So the devil's always in the details.
It is, and important to trust the person that is explaining it to you.
Yeah, that was going to be the other part there too. So, are we? You know, it's always said we're proud to have a citizen legislature. That's the way most states are, except maybe California and New York. Unlike the United States Congress, where they meet basically continuously, except for vacations and things like that. But we have a citizen legislature. Do you think we're asking too much of the average person who doesn't have the wherewithal, like you did, to attend law school and be able to handle all these statutes and things?
I've been so impressed with the quality of the people that are in Topeka. They're there because they want to be, most of them. They're there because they believe in certain things, they want to get certain things done. I think the main thing is none of us can be experts on everything, but if we can really focus in on our own committees or whatever our professions happen to be, we can't know everything, but everyone can contribute. Mm-hmm. And you're right, we're citizens. But I think that's a healthy way to do it. Mm-hmm. I think it brings people in from everywhere. We're not career politicians per se, and everyone can contribute.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned committee work. I think you told me of a bill that you nurtured through committee and carried on the floor regarding an abortion regulation. Is that right?
Right. It was the Women's Right to Know Act, which is an act that was actually passed in '92. It added to that the Disclose Act, and it just added language to the consent that women needed to sign when they're contracting for an abortion. And most abortions now are done online or maybe by the telephone, but it's mostly online. They don't have personal contact, so they need more information to make that life-changing decision. And I will just say, some people made fun of that bill because the bill said it needed to be on the website in certain font size, on certain color paper. And I really would love to say that happened for a reason, because some of the abortion providers have been bad actors in that area.
They were not really being transparent in their disclosures to the patients.
Exactly. Tiny print, gray printing on gray background.
Really?
And so we had to respond to that with, well, this needs to be up front so women know exactly what it is.
Now, I knew that there was some controversy, and I mean, they were poking fun.
Yes,
I mean, at people for, the 12, we have to do everything in 12-point times Roman, but
yes.
I didn't really know that there was opportunity, or that there had been deception, really, I would say, involved in that.
I think this was a response to what had happened, and so it was valid that was part of the bill.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you, because you're an attorney, and one of the challenges, the legislature, with Governor Brownback in place, has passed a whole series of legislation, and it's all been, none of it's taken effect in the abortion area, and it's all tied up basically in litigation and lawsuits. I think mainly in state court, but maybe some of it's in federal court too. And the question I have from a person who is looking at our republic, a democratic republic, it's really it's all litigation and lawsuits and lawyers and judges, and the average citizen, it's kind of out of their hands. And Kansas Supreme Court has a big abortion case in front of it, and it's been pending for ages. I don't know when they're going to come down with a decision.
It might be soon,
well, Karl, that's a good question, but we're going to ask Susan to hang on and answer that after we take our commercial break, and about the role of the judges in legislation, and also there's this school finance thing coming up too. So we'll be back again in just a moment. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks with Karl, Peterjohn, Kansas Representative Susan Humphries. So right before the break, Karl asked a question about what's the role of the judiciary in looking at the laws you guys have passed. And I guess the big question there is, we've got this school finance bill that's going to be, there's going to be some action this summer on that.
That's right, there should be. They did say the oral arguments are going to be July the 18th, and so we'll hear. After that, we'll know more. Right now, the law is going into effect. But I find it really interesting that the judicial branch is deciding this area, because the legislature is the one that's tasked with appropriating the funds for suitable education in Kansas. And there's a quote that was in one of the earlier decisions, that the suitability, which is in the Kansas Constitution, Article 6, Section 6, says suitability is not stagnant but requires constant monitoring. That's what this court said. So constantly, the Kansas Supreme Court, so we're going to have to be constantly monitoring if this is constitutional or not. That is not I don't believe the judicial branch's job. I feel like the legislature needs to fund education and it needs to be suitable, and then we need to keep moving on, because when one state agency or part of the state. Susan, another one, the state's not the winner in that. I don't know who is the winner in that. Nobody, I don't feel like.
Well, the lawyers and school
yes,
boards.
Exactly. I know.
Let me ask you a process question, because we've kind of conflated we're talking about abortion regulations and also school finance. They're two separate and distinct lawsuits. They're both in front of the Kansas State Supreme Court. My understanding is a decision's pending. They've had the oral arguments quite a while ago on the abortion regulation legislation.
Right.
We're going to have oral arguments in July on school finance, but when these decisions come out, it's really unclear. It could be in a month, it could be in
6 months,
6 months or a year. I mean, there's cases I've understood when I was on the county commission. We had one that was pending, I think went on for years, awaiting a decision, and so, justice delayed is justice denied.
Absolutely.
But the uncertainty. How do you think that this plays? I mean, are we becoming a judicial oligarchy with the fact that they're making the decisions in so many important areas that normally have been legislative in the past?
I feel like the Kansas citizens are the ones that are losing in that situation. It's unclear, the school financing, the abortion, all of that, and it's tied up in the litigation, and it's not helpful for the citizens. And it's you didn't really ask this question, but part of this has to do with the way our Supreme Court is appointed in Kansas, and that's a whole nother issue. But it does seem like we can do better than what we're doing now.
And we've talked about that in the past on this show, and that certainly is an area that's ripe for reform. But school finance, schools were a big part of this year's legislative session, because we did come up with a new school finance formula that looks an awful lot like the one we got rid of. But there were some threats to school choice that didn't really pan out this year. As a matter of fact, as small a victory as it may be, school choice did expand a little bit in Kansas this year. What do you know about that?
Yes, it did, and that was one of the bright spots in the school funding formula, I feel like. We have it's the tax credit for low-income student scholarship, and in the past, corporations have been able to donate for scholarships, and they are able to get a tax credit of 70% of the amount that they've donated.
So if you owed $10 in income tax and you donated that $10 to a scholarship organization, you would get a credit to the state for $7.
Yes,
You'd still have to pay $3, but the $7 would be forgiven.
Exactly. And before it's just corporations, and now it's all individuals. So I think that's a wonderful expansion of that school choice. Even though school choice is this big in Kansas, I feel like we have a lot of area that we can do better in
and
that.
now when James Franco of Kansas Policy Institute was here about a month ago, there's about 188 students in that program, and it's about $500,000 is the amount of money we're talking about, yet that's portrayed as a grave threat to public schools in Kansas. Was there much effort to integrate more charter schools into the school funding formula?
Not yet. Nothing like that yet. I am a big advocate of that. And I would like to say my husband and I will be contributing to that scholarship fund. And I would just like to encourage other individuals to do so also.
Now, how would you find out about that? Do you think that the state's going to promote that?
I don't think they're going to promote it, and I don't have that information right now. But I will get it to you and let you get it to your listeners.
So I wonder if it's going to be like on, you file your Kansas taxes now, and there's the chickadee checkoff and a few other checkoffs. I was surprised to learn how very few people actually check off those things, but it's going to be a little bit more involved to make a contribution to the schools, because you'll actually have to write a check, I believe, to
the scholarship fund, and then you can deduct that because it's a credit from your state income taxes, which have gone up, will be going up July 1st, retroactively.
Well, they went up January 1st, actually. We just didn't know it about it.
It's wrong. Yes, that's a yes.
And I think on that tax credit, is going to be more complicated, because I think the scholarship organization is going to have to give you a form or something that you submit with your taxes that says you made this contribution, you're entitled to the credit.
Assuming, and I will get you that information.
Well, we'll look forward, and we will certainly put that up at wichitaliberty.org.
Okay,
so
good.
We are a bit over time for this segment, so let's take our final commercial break, and we'll come back with more Wichita Liberty TV. Well, welcome back to our last segment of Wichita Liberty TV this week. I'm still Bob Weeks, Karl Peterjohn, Kansas State Representative Susan Humphries. Susan, you obviously are a woman. This year there was a lot of talk in some circles about a women's caucus at the Kansas Legislature, but you told me you weren't a member of that. Were you even invited?
I was not invited to the women's caucus.
I'm just surprised. I mean, obviously a woman here, but not part of the women's caucus.
No, and I knew there was something going on. Women were walking around with big pads and markers and going in rooms, and I knew there was something going on, and I never heard a word about it. There were 5 women legislators that were not invited to the women's caucus.
Was that caucus in both the House and the Senate, or just the House?
I believe it was both the House and the Senate. I don't know much about the Senate side of it. I just really know what happened with the House side.
Well, so why were you not invited? Do you know?
Well, when you look at the 5 that were not invited, we 5 all would be considered conservative. And so I have to think the reason we were not invited was because of ideological reasons.
Now, was it the caucus including both Republicans and Democrats?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
I see.
So actually, you were kind of a minority within a minority then.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, that's the way, I mean, we've talked about this a lot with like time masters and so forth, really kind of split up into thirds. The legislature is almost exactly between Democrats, left-wing Republicans.
Yes.
I'm not going to call them moderates.
They're not moderate, and I appreciate you making that distinction.
Well, I think it's Mary Pilcher Cook a few years ago that coined that left-wing Republicans, so credit her with that.
I suspect Mary wasn't invited either.
I don't think so. That's right.
But yeah, there were, and of course, I suspected you were not invited, or at least not a member, because the Women's Caucus was credited with stirring up the tax increases.
Yes,
year.
absolutely.
Well, let me ask you, was Senate President Susan Wagle, I mean, the first woman who was president of the Senate, was she one of the 5, or was she part of the caucus?
Well, she's in the Senate, so there were 5 House members that were not
you were aware
invited.
of 5
But
House
I don't
members.
think Susan was invited in the Senate either. So, right.
Oh, that was interesting. The highest ranked woman in the legislature.
And I would say
did
I
not
had reached
participate.
out to some of the other women from my side to say, hey, let's get together. Let's talk about this. I had tried to, form some alliances, and I think caucuses are good. Get together and talk. But when they call it the Women's Caucus, and then not all the women are invited,
and not
it's a
even
little bit
invited.
disingenuous.
That's at least they could extend, the pro forma invitation. I can understand you might declining or not be excited about being involved with some of these people.
Yeah.
Another thing we hear off and on in newspaper editorials, on people talking on Facebook all over, they say, we elected you guys to go to Topeka and get a job done, get to work up there, represent the people of Kansas.
Yes.
I mean, you did not vote for a tax increase. Were you not representing your constituents?
I was, absolutely. And I will say, if people could read my emails, they would understand that my constituents were supportive of the way that I voted. And I got lots of emails from lots of people, and I did take note. But as my husband says, the biggest poll that happened was last November and August when I won the election, with them knowing that I was not in favor of tax increase.
Because your Republican opponent in the primary was, in favor, I think.
I think he wanted to go back to 2012 tax system. So.
Which is pretty much what happened.
Yes, except I would like to add, since then we've even raised taxes. Sales tax has been raised.
Right.
We don't have the mortgage. We're going to phase that back in. But other taxes were raised through those years. So if we went back to 2012, it's more plus more.
Well, the excise taxes have been dramatically increased in the last few years. Of course, that was before you joined the legislature. Yeah. Do you feel like Kansas is becoming the high tax point on the prairie again?
Karl, absolutely. I feel like people don't understand that the more money people keep, the more they can invest, the more they can spend, the more they can give away. And that's how people thrive and grow, and our economy grows. And I don't understand.
But there's a lot of other people on the otother side, the 1/3 plus maybe the 1/3 that thinks that government spends that money more wisely than you do.
Well, let's just see about that. We'll just see.
And people are very often concerned about the point that Karl brought up. There are people on Facebook and others that say, gee, Colorado didn't cut taxes and their economy's growing. Well, Colorado collects less in taxes on a per person basis than Kansas does to begin with. So they already have lower taxes than we do.
Yeah. And I think they have even a single payer, if I recall. one
a single
tier.
level income tax.
Yes, right.
Yes, I believe you're right on
Yeah,
that.
and we went from
it's
2
much
to
lower.
3 this year.
It's much lower
unfortunately.
than even the lowest rate in Kansas. I think it's under 3.1%.
I'm not sure.
But it is tough, you know, even in Oklahoma. Mary Fallin, the governor, has been known as I think a hard line on deficits and spending and so forth. But she proposed a lot of tax increases this year, so there's a lot of pressure up there. I think to do that. Well,
so.
Susan, we are just about out of time.
Okay.
So thank you very much for appearing on Wichita Liberty TV this week, and good luck to you in the future.
Thank you.
Karl, thank you for your
Happy
insight.
to be here. So much to talk about.
Well, very good. There is.
Thank
So
you.
we'll plan maybe in the fall or something.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Bob Weeks for another episode of Wichita Liberty TV, and we hope to see you again next week.